April, good to see you. We're here though with some tough news today. This video is for anybody who's been laid off recently or who thinks they may be laid off. You have some really good action steps for them. But of course, just to bring people up on the headlines, the Trump administration began mass layoffs of 10,000 staffers at U.S. health agencies, the Department of Health and Human Services, the FDA, the NIH, and of course the CDC, which is based in Atlanta. This has radically affected your community and your neighbors.
It really has. And it's just such a sad thing, Aaron. I mean, people really don't know when the other shoe is going to drop, so to speak. People getting notifications really left and right. I'm hearing from multiple people who still are employed at the CDC, and really just a lot of uncertainty and confusion with frankly, not a whole lot of communication surrounding expectations, or even HR available to speak with them in this time. So it's there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, and a lot we still don't know.
And it's such a big story affecting so many people. And you're such a great resource, April, just to remind everybody who didn't get to see it that you were interviewed by 11 Alive. You have the full story up on your YouTube page with some more good information there. But just to clarify, and I know that it's really difficult because there's so much going on right now, but you have been trying to walk through a few specific clients and you're facing some real roadblocks. Can you just tell us so people have a heads up?
The first that I'm really seeing goes back to the communication again. You know, there were a lot of people who had the opportunity to retire early before this RIF took place. They had an opportunity to put in their papers essentially and determine what they would receive if they retired early, because if they don't meet the requirements, both age-wise and tenure, and they leave or they're let go, then they would receive a pretty significantly reduced pension for life.
Right.
So, you know, a lot of people put those papers in really out of self-preservation. And the thing is, you really don't even know what those figures are going to be. You have to put the papers in to see if you're approved, and then you receive those numbers. And what I'm seeing is a very tight timeline because HR is so inundated that you can't call to ask questions. Emails are going unreturned. They're just so inundated they cannot keep up. And people are quite frankly just blindly putting in their papers, hoping for a guarantee of the early retirement without having the reduced pension. And for a lot of people, that's a very scary place to be right now.
Right. And you had mentioned wanting to remind everybody to double check their numbers on certain paperwork and documents. Remind me which those are again, please.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm seeing is that you can go in and put your own information on for the retirement estimate report. And I'm looking at one right now that shows we really have to, when we're talking about retirement planning in general, we really have to be cognizant that we're using net numbers. The gross number is wildly irrelevant because that's not what you're going to end up with in your pocket. It's much like when you're looking at your paycheck and the amount that you see on there before all the deductions is quite different than the amount that's deposited into your bank account. And this is no different. The one that I'm looking at right now, part of the problem that I'm seeing, you can go in, you can manually input your high 3 average salary, make sure that your numbers are correct for getting an estimate of what you would receive on a monthly basis. But what I'm seeing is that there are some withholdings that are grossly inaccurate, including, federal tax withholding at a very, very nominal value that's not sufficient whatsoever, underestimated by hundreds of dollars, health insurance premium deduction that's off in this instance by a little over $100. We're talking several $100s a month in this example alone on these figures that are not populating correctly or in a way that really, quite frankly, makes any sense. So really investigating those numbers, making sure that you're looking at the net and that we're not taking anything at face value right now with what these figures are, making sure we're getting to the bottom of where they're coming from and do they make sense? Because if you don't have the official figures until after you've already put those papers in, we want to make sure we're getting as close as we can with that estimated report.
Yeah, this is such a stressful time. Speaking as someone who has been laid off, my heart goes everyone out to everyone who is struggling with this because it is so much to deal with emotionally and then trying to make sure that it doesn't affect you financially as well. So let's get into some action steps. The first one may be the most straightforward. File for unemployment.
And who knows how long that's going to take, quite frankly, for processing purposes. So, doing that as quickly, as promptly as possible. Don't hesitate to follow up on it, but make sure that you're anticipating a potential delay in receiving those benefits. We're seeing a lot of delays in other types of filing, disability benefits, unemployment benefits. I don't believe are going to be any different. So file those papers as soon as you can, and immediately pivot into the next best source of income to help you bridge that gap.
And no matter where you are in your job right now, laid off or not, always a good time to update your resume.
Absolutely, and especially if you're in one of these, one of these parts of the workforce where it's highly likely that there will be additional reductions in workforce, or buyouts, whatever it might end up being, a combination of all of the above. Be prepared. Be as prepared as you can. Maybe even start looking for something now so that you don't lose benefits. It depends. Sometimes you're going to keep the benefits. Sometimes you'll maintain a portion of those. There are so many different structures when it pertains to layoffs, and then federal employees are an entirely different ballgame than the private sector as well.
Mhm. And then kind of a side note, Cobra should help with some gap if you have for health insurance.
Mhm. It should, yes. It's there for you, but it also can be quite expensive.
Right.
Just because it is there as a source doesn't mean that it's cost effective. But yes, Cobra is a fail safe to have something, if nothing else, kind of viewing it almost like a catastrophic insurance policy, making sure that there's something in place, and that should be a part of, and both. In almost all situations, that would be a part of the paperwork during that process
Mhm, mhm,
for how you need to handle your health insurance coverage.
mhm. And next, of course, you need to double check your severance, your final paycheck, unpaid PTO. If there's anything that you think that may be coming to you, find it out, get documentation.
Yes, absolutely. And another thing that I would check as well is making sure, based off of some of the things that I'm seeing, making sure that from those income and those payment sources, making sure that the taxes are appropriately withheld from those additional payments. The last thing we'd really want to see is a tax surprise when you go to file next year, finding out that there was an under withholding from those items, because these systems don't seem to be defaulting in an efficient manner.
That's really stressful. And then you also suggest reviewing your 401k or other retirement accounts. Why is that?
Right now we're seeing two storms, if you will, at the same time. The layoffs that are happening, not just federally, but in the private sector as well. So if you've got a 401k, 457, 403b, if we're talking, again, about some of the folks that I've been talking to a whole lot this week, we're talking about their savings plans, making sure that you know where you stand with your income sources. Do you
Mhm,
have an income plan for contingencies such as this? What is the strategy that you're going to use? Making sure that you're not positioned too aggressively. So, of course, the first round, the first storm, if you will, is the layoffs. Second is stock market volatility that we're
mhm,
seeing right now that has a lot of people a bit nervous. We want to make sure that we're fundamentally sound, that we're not overly aggressive. But a very important aspect of that as well is making sure that we're not making emotionally based decisions when it comes to how we're allocating for retirement. Let's not make short-term volatility and short-term uncertainty dictate adjustments that we make and hurt us in the long run.
mhm. And in case somebody is concerned about whether they should, if they're on the, if they're concerned they're on the bubble and then they're choosing between beefing up their emergency account or contributing to their retirement accounts, how big should that emergency fund be?
a really good rule of thumb, at least as a starting point, is about six months worth of expenses to have
Yeah.
in an emergency reserve. I don't like rules that are one size fits all, but because
Right.
every situation is different, depending on where your expenses are,
Mhm.
whether you have a mortgage or not. There are so many factors that go into that. How much of your spending is discretionary spending, what other sources you have, if there's a tax efficient brokerage or other account where you can pull additional funds from. A lot of factors go into that, but a good starting point is having 6 months of expenses on the sidelines where you can access it without any tax implication or penalty.
Mm. And April, this is such an important time to surround yourself with a good support system. Of course, friends, and it's unfortunate when you don't have an advocate in HR, but this also might be a good opportunity to call a financial advisor just to have somebody else in your corner. Can you walk through why that might be the right choice for some people?
I spent about an hour on a webinar this morning with a lady who is really fearful for what is to come. The first reduction in workforce did not impact her. It impacted a lot of people she knows, and she's concerned it could be any day now for her. So what I'm finding, and I find this consistent in a lot of scenarios as people prepare for retirement, but what I'm finding is that having a retirement income plan that is on paper with all sources accounted for, social security planning, income tax withholding, how long is that going to look sustainable at the current spending level? Having a visual on that, understanding what you have and how it can be, how you can utilize it, how it can work for you, you really just have this weight lifted off the shoulders.
Mhm.
You can physically see it when someone is able to see that and to know that, despite this not being the plan, despite this happening with little to no warning, that there is an adjustment or adjustments that can be made to put you in a positive position. And I'm seeing a lot of people who are now retiring in a hybrid retirement where this trend started actually quite a while before these layoffs began. And a lot of people, what they're doing, primarily for healthcare purposes, quite frankly, bridging to that Medicare age of 65, is retiring from their career, potentially even collecting a pension from it, and then doing something part-time that is really just more of enjoyment and to supplement for healthcare costs. So that is, something that's become more and more common, and certainly an avenue that a lot of people can consider if they don't feel like they're going to be stable enough to retire or have a forced early retirement.
Mhm. Well, April, again, thank you for being such a good resource for me, for your community, and such a great advocate for your clients. If somebody has any questions, though, and they would like to give you, reach out to you, how can they do that?
You can reach out to us 24 hours a day on our website, theretirementfamily.com, or you're more than welcome to call one of our offices. Our first step is to set up an introduction call. We'll spend about 15 minutes getting to know you and sharing with you what our processes look like so we can determine if we might be a fit to help.
Great. April, thank you.
Thank you, Erin.